A dead child, a dead wife, homelessness, a crushed leg, house fires, an untimely end. Such was the life of Thomas Hickory, born in 1877. Hickory married Jenny Cooney on the Muskogee Creek Nation reservation before the creek lands were allotted. She was the granddaughter of Dugabachi, a widely respected local leader of the Creek community. Dugabachi was the steadfast pillar of the tight-knit Cooney-Hickory family. Orchestrated tragedy would plague his descendants and their loved ones for decades following his death. Hickory loved his family, and his family loved him.
I'm not one to cry easily, but that brought tears to my eyes when I thought of him and what they'd done to him.
While many consider the Allotment Era and its associated crimes to be distant history, for allottee descendants like Hickory's granddaughter Sallie, it is their lifetime. Sallie was born in 1939. Her papa lived with her and her family off and on after he was kicked out of his homestead to make room for the mansions of Tulsa's most wealthy. When Thomas Hickory was 37 or 38, his firstborn child, Lucinda, died. Her family has always said her death was suspicious, believing she was likely poisoned. She had both a coal mine and a natural gas field on her allotment, mined outside of her family's control. Thomas and Jenny were forced into court just over 1 week after she died. Both of them spoke only Creek, depending on interpreters to assist them through the court proceedings, held in English. As Thomas Hickory mourned the death of his oldest daughter, lawyers accused him of being a drunk, accusations Hickory repeatedly denied. When a man named George McDaniel petitioned the courts to be their guardian, the couple refused. A judge sided with the couple and declared them competent, a newsworthy item in the Tulsa Daily Democrat back in 1913. Their remaining children were sent to Indian boarding schools.
Right here on this property somewhere is where he built his family's home and their farm. They had land in cultivation. I believe his daughter was murdered. 2 years later, his wife is dead.
Jenny Hickory was just 41 years old. Her cause of death remains unknown. 2 years after that, Thomas Hickory was declared incompetent and assigned a guardian. Hickory later testified strangers ran him and his family off of their land when he tried to go home. Some witnessed the wrongdoing committed against him and his family and tried to intervene. Attorney John Wakely sent a letter to Indian Affairs and the Creek National Attorney on behalf of the Hickory family in 1920. In it, he pleaded for an investigation into the deceased Dugabachi kin and their survivors. Wakely said the children's guardian sold the surplus allotment of Jenny Hickory against his repeated protests. In 1926, one of Hickory's legs was severely mutilated. At the same time, his children were in court trying to get his wife's land back.
They say he fell asleep near a railroad track and the train ran over his leg.
Hickory's great-granddaughter, Tatiana Duncan, doesn't buy it. Trains are known to completely sever body parts when run over, not break them in 3 places like Hickory's was.
So I can't help but wonder, was that intentional?
Hickory's guardian, Henry F. Cooper, began leasing his land for oil and gas mining in 1944. After being forced off the land he had shared with his wife, Hickory moved on to his own allotment, where his daughter and her family lived. Then, their house burned down.
The whole family got rodeo tickets that they couldn't afford. They showed up at the house, so they were all at the rodeo. And my great-grandfather, Thomas Hickory, was by himself when the house caught fire.
Hickory was rescued by a group of neighbors.
That's very suspicious because we lived in that home a long time. But for that to occur, while we were gone, but they saved. My grandpa was glad of that.
The family moved into a 2-story barn on their property and outfitted it into their new home. Then, that burned down too. A year later, Hickory was dead, the victim of another accident. This time, a drunk driver. He was 71 years old.